Hey everybody, welcome to the Tech Founder Show. We're back for another episode. Super exciting it's always exciting to talk to tech founders doing things that are just really innovative at the bleeding edge of technology. So joined as usual, my partner in crime, Andy Halko. Andy, you're looking lighter here this week. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I had, the the hermit beard for a while, and now it's gone. So
Yeah,
you
so
look like you're enjoying your outside
I
picnic.
am. I am. I'm having a little picnic out here. So just done some time outside. Nice day.
That's fun.
So,
So
yeah.
tell me a little bit about who we're talking to today.
Yeah, so today we have a duo joining us. We got co-founders Ashley Etling and Chantal Emmanuel from LimeLoop. And LimeLoop is data-driven packaging without the waste. So some really cool stuff that they're doing with the good technology. So let me go ahead and bring them on. Chantal and Ashley, how are you guys doing?
Great. Nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, welcome. So I guess to start out, we would just love to hear just a little bit. I just gave one line about what LimeLoop is. We would love to hear from your perspective. What is the solution, and then we'll dive in. We'd love to hear where the origin story. Where did you guys start out? But first, the overview.
Yeah, I think Ashley might be having some audio issues, so I'll just kick us off. So,
Okay.
LimeLoop launched 3 years ago with our first company, Toad & Co., and really tackling the challenge twofold of reusable packaging. So as we all know, especially post-COVID, a lot of online shopping is happening, which means a lot of waste is piling up in our landfill, both in the forms of cardboard boxes and plastic poly mailers. And so we really saw no reason why something that really only has a lifespan of about a day or two of the travel time living in our landfills forever. And then when you kind of now pull that out a bit and start to understand more about what's happening on the logistical side of the supply chain, there are a lot of holes in how we're getting things from point A to point B, and now with a lot of returns back to point A. And so we saw a really great opportunity to not only rethink the way that we do packaging, but rethink that the way we do the full logistical and supply chain system as a whole.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'll just say real quickly off the top of my head, first thing that comes to my mind is the shipping onion that I opened an Amazon package and it's like box and then another box and then probably another box and then a plastic wrapper and then something else. And I feel like just peeling away the onion, and it's ridiculous. It just makes me so frustrated at times.
Likewise, yeah. We really created the way that we ship packaging with more of a store to store in mind, right? So how do we get 100 t-shirts from the warehouse to the store? It was never really meant to take that same way of doing that for the one t-shirt to your home, but we just replicated that same process. And now we're obviously running into the challenges of what happens when you do that at scale.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. So I think you hinted at it a little bit, but how did you get into it? So how did you get here?
Ashley, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Tony and Andy.
Oh. Well, we're going to really test our co-founding skills. So the question is about kind of how do we get here?
Yeah, so it actually happened way back when my last company, we were pretty much developing product and then developing the technology to make it easier for enterprise companies like Target, Walmart, and GE to develop products. So we were shipping a lot of products and I was looking for a sustainable solution, couldn't really find it. My sister just happened to be in a home ec class, so had her kind of whip up this idea of a reusable package. So tested it, was working really well, and we transitioned the company to a full enterprise software solution. So it was no longer really shipping products. And so at that point, fast forward 10 years later, as I was doing a lot of research on e-commerce, these boxes were piling at our front door, and I just ironically opened a box that was collecting dust in our house, and it happened to have one of these reusable mailers in it. And and serendipitously was talking to Chantal. And so as we, got deeper into the problems and foreseeable future of e-commerce, really started looking at, one, if we could, replace reusables, all the single use with reusables, then add technology into them, then we could actually provide visibility into the full supply chain in a really unique way that hadn't really been done before. And with the growth of e-commerce, and especially with what we're seeing with the pandemic, we're seeing that more and more that solution becomes, a must-have and continue into the future.
Can you guys talk a little bit more about the technology side of it? Obviously, this is something that's very physical. Where did the technology idea come in, and how did that play into this? I'm really intrigued by, how you say technology then opens up for greater visibility into the supply chain. And I know you can't translate that whole question, but
no, for sure. It's what we eat, breathe, and sleep. So happy to. So the technology really tackles two major questions. So one is, how do we maximize the number of journeys a single package can make? And two, how do we take advantage of the long life cycle of our packets to learn more about what's going on in and around them? So to backpedal about the kind of more the asset management side of things. So it takes twofold. It's both a software and a hardware solution. On the software side, you can think of it as an asset management tool. Where is my packet? When is it coming back? I need to print out new labels, tactical things like that. I want to measure how much environmental impacts and saving I've had along the way. So basically everything that you need as a brand, the fulfillment center, or the end consumer to really make this system work at scale. And then because our packages last over 200 times, it's a really great opportunity to learn more about what's going on inside. And that's where the hardware sensor comes in. Of course, you're not going to put a sensor in a packet that goes into the garbage every single time. There's no ROI in that. So what we love about what we're doing is sustainability not only is like a nice to have, but it's a must have and actually becomes a value add to that. And so about that environmental savings or the environment inside the package, we're looking at the temperature. So really think of great applications for groceries, pharmaceuticals, any temperature sensitive packaging, to be able to put that in there and know what the temperature is at any given time. Monitoring the open rate. So it's a really great opportunity on both the marketing side, but of course the security side. So is your packets being tampered with before it gets to you? When is really the best time to be delivered? So Andy might get a pair of jeans on Monday, but on average, we're seeing he's not opening until Saturday. Maybe that's the right day to deliver all of his things to him because he's most likely to actually interact with it inside. And of course, the third side of that is the location. So where is my packet? It's the number one question people call up customer service for when they make an order online. So apply that out to the amount of customer service hours that are being spent answering that question. And then the customer side, how much frustration is when you're trying to figure out where your packet is. So why not give people that information and let them arm themselves to make decisions based off of that?
So it sounds like you were able to package a lot of, or pack in a lot of technology into these packages. How is that done? And how did you create a product that has all of this tech in it that gets, moved around so much?
Yeah, and the great thing about the technology, especially in a pre-circuit shortage world, is they're generally really easy to find off-the-shelf sensor technology that we've combined in a unique way and are leveraging in a unique way through our packaging. So the technology itself is not anything super complicated. We're just able to take simple sensors and use them in a way that hasn't been used before to arm people with really great knowledge and information and data.
Very cool. Ashley, any luck hearing us? Doesn't seem like.
I'm going to say that no. So Ashley, we're kind of just running through all the sensor technology and why and how we're leveraging it right now.
I'm really, and maybe this could be passed along to Ashley, which would be great, is I'm interested in, how do you change the mindset and habits of folks, both the companies that you need to convince to change the way that they handle their supply chain and do things, but then also consumers?
Yeah, so the question is around the consumer behavior change on both the consumer side and the brands and helping them kind of change the way that they're looking at and doing things.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so we do it kind of multiple ways. So we provide different kind of programs, and those were, at first a pretty, self-service kind of approach. And now we're adding layers of technology to that to really automate it. So kind of think Shopify integrations, plug in LimeLoop, and then you can really, optimize these programs. So one of those programs, for example, is having an opt-in program. So at the end of checkout, when they're going to shop for their Levi's jeans, they could opt into a LimeLoop reusable package. And from there, they're already educated on the process. And then when you receive a notification that your package was just dropped off, in that email, it also says, hey, there's this LimeLoop package. And when you drop it off at USPS, you are adding XYZ of an impact. And then through that, we're continuing to, evolve different programs that lead into more gamification, communication, and continuing to add layers of technology. But then also just even when you receive that package, there'll be, a little saying in there that reminds you to return this package, and continues to go through the cycle.
Yeah, just to add on the consumer side, we always like to remind people that yes, it's a behavior change, but for anyone who spends the day before garbage day breaking down cardboard boxes, you're already spending time managing the packaging. And so this is actually a much more delightful experience in just sending that back via your at-home mailbox or the blue bin near you.
Yeah, that undoing the packaging can turn into a whole day effort sometimes when
Exactly.
you've got, 30 boxes that end up piling up.
Exactly.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the target audiences. Has Shopify, has it been, e-commerce businesses that you guys have targeted? Is that a big channel for you? What are the others, what are you finding success with?
Yeah, I can hear you, Tony. So that's great.
Okay, good.
Sorry, Andy. Yeah, it's a great question. So we really went into it to let's test the reusable packages within the whole infrastructure. Let's test logistics. And then what kind of data would really add value to our customers? So to start that at kind of an relatively easy, if you can call it that, point of entry, we said, let's start with apparel, because we can create a soft good package that can move through the stream at a pretty, lightweight load to be able to really test and understand. And then from there, we've been able to take a lot of those learnings and scale them amongst multiple industries and then multiple brands, and from small brands all the way to the largest retailers in the world. And so by starting with that basic foundation, then we are continue to be able to really scale with all those infrastructures, how those reusable packages move within the system, how logistics work for carriers, for 3PLs, and then also within the retail infrastructure in itself. And then also continuing to build on that data and predictive analytics to really be able to guide brands to really increase that double bottom line.
I'm curious if you've done any targeting of, larger companies that have these big pushes for sustainability. I know that's been a big push in many industries, in a lot of larger organizations. Has that been a focus for you as well?
Yeah, we definitely hear often, what about Patagonia? And so what's actually turned out to be really beautiful about the solution, that most companies who are understanding the future of e-commerce, not only from a supply chain perspective, but also the customer, and understanding what millennials are looking for, what Gen Z is looking for, it has become so much more open than the Patagonias and the Toad & Co's of the world to most every company looking at how they really become a part of this larger impact. But then also just, think about during the pandemic and not being able to find your toilet paper. All the brands are discovering deeper that there's deeper supply chain issues and visibility. And by being able to add these technology layers, and we can add that in a unique way, they're also able to add a better experience for their customer beyond just the sustainability side of it well. So just really increasing that experience is something we've been focused on.
That's great. I guess I've mentioned a couple of times, the impact of the pandemic. I would like to hear, what did that do to your business, and how did it change things and maybe help certain things evolve faster in other directions?
Yeah, it definitely happened, I would say on the technology side. So I'll let Chantal, definitely give you a little more insight into that. But all in all, it has opened up supply chain and the weaknesses, but also the opportunities.
Yeah, so I think on the bigger scale, it really reiterated a lot of the things that we've been talking about for a while. And I think the biggest thing on the technology side, when we first started talking about the company 3 years ago, when your mental model is the cardboard box, it almost feels like over engineering to talk about software and sensors and all of these other things that we're talking about reinventing the box with. And I would say that that conversation drastically shifted with COVID because of, as I mentioned, Ashley mentioned, all of the holes we're seeing in supply chain and lost packaging, the increase of reverse logistics. So if you think about it, pre-pandemic, you're going to the store, you're trying on 3 pairs of jeans in different sizes and walking out the store with the one that fits. Today, a lot of people are ordering 3 to 4 different pairs of jeans and then sending back the ones that don't fit. So now all of a sudden these companies are having these huge challenges with reverse logistics and where's my packaging and when is that coming back and putting that back into stock. And those are all technology-based problems and need technology-based solutions. So I would say the biggest thing is that whether it's around the environmental side of things and what we were talking about in terms of the waste accumulating and the supply chain fixes, and just a lot of those conversations went from us kind of knocking on doors to people knocking on our doors saying like, we need help with this.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I heard not even that long ago is that like 50% of what you return to Amazon just goes straight to a landfill.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that, your solution impacts at all? Because when I hear that, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Amazon and most of the companies in the world, there's just no idea of what's coming back, when it's coming back, and what shape it's coming back in. And so something as simple as I mentioned before, being able to have that open rate monitor of knowing whether the package has been opened at all, or is it something that came to your doorstep and it happens to me all the time. You order and you think you really need it, and then it comes, or you've already gone and bought it from the store. So you never actually open that box. And there's a lot of people who do that. But if Amazon and the other companies don't know that that's happened, they're having to send that to a third-party solution to then either go through and maybe put it back on the shelf, but in more often than not the cases, that is just ending up in the landfill. So as much as we can arm these brands with information about what's happening to that package and therefore that product, the better decisions they can make about whether or not to divert that back to the store to put it back on the shelf, to the TJ Maxxes and the other liquidators of the world, to organizations to donate it to. There's all these other options that they can do based on knowing what's going on with that product.
Yeah, I think that's a big impact. Just to shift a little bit, I'm always curious about how organizations take an idea, and especially when it's a physical product, physical piece, and also software. How do you turn that into something real? What was the process? Was it going out and needing to research the technology and then build the software? How did you actually physically get from this idea to a true solution?
Yeah, so Ashley, the question is, how do we get from the idea of LimeLoop to the true solution and kind of bring that all together from packet to software? So I can kick us off with the software side of things and kind of the holistic view that we have, which is really breaking down this kind of big behemoth of a problem into the different parts and really being thoughtful and focused on how we tackle it. The goal is to be the end-to-end solution, but we really had to figure out what our way in was and then how we can expand from there. So we started small. We started with just the reusable packaging. You could, in 2018, you can sign up with LimeLoop and rent reusable packaging from us and leverage that instead of your box or your poly mailer to ship out your products and have those sent back. So there was no platform in the very beginning and no hardware sensor. And in the back end, of course, we were building out those things. So we just really figured out our lowest barrier of entry, started working with really great brands who were both sustainably focused, but also really wanted to tap into the more technology-based solutions as we roll those out, and then grew incrementally with that.
Yeah, and then I'd say from there, as we continue to build out that infrastructure and add that technology to the reusable packaging to continue to make it smarter, we continue to look at connectivity. So how do you continue to grow connectivity so that you can actually truly understand where this package is at all points of the cycle? And then as we look into kind of that next frontier over the next 10, 15 years is what is the, future of delivery really look like, especially in urban environments. We have been talking about drones, we've been talking about robots, but as policies shift, as technology becomes more readily available, we look at then with that connectivity, how do we actually get to a point to we can remove packaging altogether and actually really power the whole infrastructure of how we move packages around, how you receive your packages. Before the pandemic, we were at e-commerce was 15% of retail. We're probably looking at numbers about 30% at this point. And so we're still at the really early infancy of how we send and receive goods to people's homes. And so we were really excited of becoming, as Chantal said, that full solution and full visibility solution for how we actually move products through that supply chain. So all in all, there's never a dull moment around the office.
That's fantastic, and we appreciate you guys sharing that with us. I would love to hear a little bit about the dynamic between the two of you and the roles that you each play as co-founders.
Yeah, so Chantal was our lead engineer at my last software company. And she was, typically we went through this long hiring process called references. You're pretty classic, kind of long hiring. And Chantal came in for an interview probably an hour, and we called her an hour later, and probably one of the best hires I've ever made and best decision as a founder. And we've been working together for over 10 years. So we really have this dynamic of trusting each other, knowing when to divide and conquer, but then also knowing when to bring each other in to really, collaborate, hash through something, get to a quick decision, and continue to move the company forward. And with that kind of a no, BS mentality, no politics, we've really been able to go full steam ahead, build an incredible team and culture around that kind of energy that we've really built in working together. And then as far as, roles go and, we do day to day, definitely Chantal comes to the table with, tech brain and constantly looking at how we scale with technology. And, my background more in logistics and supply chain, but a love for technology and scale. So, constantly coming to Chantal, well, I really want to scale this. How can we add layers of technology around that? And then, her and I just a love for building business and solving big problems continues then to bring us together in this collaboration that, really, creates a beautiful solution, but also great company.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like people reach out to me, especially being a technical co-founder, being like, how do you find your co-founder? And how, especially technical co-founder. And it's like, I can't really relate with the struggles because of the fact that Ashley and I were able to work together and now being co-founders, I feel like it was a really great opportunity to see her from both sides, right? As first an employee of her as a founder, now as a co-founder. And so it was a really easy decision for me to make. And as you mentioned, it's this really beautiful yin and yang of like being really shared on the vision and sharing that kind of bigger picture for the company, but having unique ways of coming about it that like really helps to avoid that group think that I think sometimes you can have if you work with someone who's too similar to you. We're able to come at problems from different sides and kind of be that other voice in making those bigger decisions.
How do you drive that vision in the organization? How have you defined it? And then how do you, not only stay on the same page with each other, but then help really, push it into the organization so everybody's aligned?
Yeah, it's been a trial and error for sure. And I think we've kind of narrowed it down on, finding that right balance between, near future KPIs and goals and kind of checking in on how that up levels, and all while being nimble and recognizing that both of those things can change depending on kind of what's happening with customers in the market and the world as we see it, because could have very different plans from what we think is happening. And so in a more tactical look, we have our KPIs, our monthly, our yearly, we have it planned out for pretty far into the future, and we check in.
It looks like we got a freeze here.
them pretty regularly. Hear you. So I'm going to keep chatting and we'll see. There we go. So yeah,
Okay.
as a team, we're collaborating there all the time. So a lot of, how everyone has their responsibilities. Also, everyone has hands in the different terms of kind of where to pull you in to help along at any given time.
I think to sum up what Chantal was saying is we love data, but we also know that data is not always true. And it's what you take that data to tell the story to get us to where we need to go to achieve that bigger vision. So we're constantly pulling data, creating a story, but then also, really, re-collaborating on how we actually take that and move the company forward.
Ashley, what does the rest of the organization look like? What does the team make up? And tell us a bit about that if you can.
Yeah, it's been primarily tech focused of the weight of the team. And that's just really been our focus, the last year and a half, 2 years, and, really from the very beginning. And so and most of our inbound has been very organic. So we haven't had to do any marketing, but we definitely have set that foundation, feel very confident on scale. And so now we're starting to put money behind that, which also means building out that full team to really get the marketing team going and continue to scale the company. And then the second part is really, as we get deeper into these larger partnerships, that is a massive infrastructure change. That means how we clean the reusable packages, how we care and maintain the technology, and then also where do we store them? Where do they go? How do they move through this system? So we're building out the operations team who can strategically think, how can we do it today? And how can we continue to optimize, over in the future? So we're hiring right now for VP of Operations, going to give a little plug. And then we're also hiring on the marketing and sales team as well, as Chantal also continues to build out on the technology. But when we think about technology, it's definitely twofold. We have the hardware and we have the software. But as we continue to gain more data, we also build out the data infrastructure and data scientists as well.
I'd like to hear a little bit about the way you would define the culture at LimeLoop and how you guys have gone about, how intentional you've been with that, and how do you drive that forward?
Yeah, and I think collaboration is one of the biggest ones because our main mentality is solving big problems with transparency. And to be able to solve big problems with transparency, you have to bring multidisciplinary teams together to work together in a really effective way. And I think then from there, you have to set, what that culture is to work effectively together, especially in a remote world where we continue to not be in a room together every day, yet set up tools and time to be able to have some of that time to actually really work together through some of these bigger problems.
Yeah, and I think it's really about kind of being intentional about it. We're a relatively small team, and I think it's obviously a lot easier to define culture when there's only a handful of folks. And so it's kind of about how do we put into place and define those things today when we have the bandwidth to do it because of the smaller team, to make sure that we're replicating that as we grow bigger. And then I would say it's also about expanding beyond just the team. And it also incorporates the brands that we're working with and the way that we produce our products and the ethical and sustainability focus that we have around that. And so thinking beyond just the people, but also the holistic picture of who we are as a company and who we want to be in the next 10, 15 years as well.
Yeah, something that Chantal and I continue to be interested in and want to continue to drive is the stigma that's associated with sustainability that can't be profitable. And so as we continue to spearhead the company, really looking at truly defining that double bottom line and how, doing something that makes a positive impact can also make an impact on your P&L in a really, really impactful way as well. And so as we develop culture, but also in those external forefronts, continue to look at how can we be leaders in that and also be actually a true example of how the two really marry together.
How do you attract people who are who buy into that concept and that your vision and your mission? Because you guys are doing something that's multifaceted. There's a lot going on here. There's this sustainability aspect related to the packaging, but then there's also really cool tech stuff with the location and data that's involved. I would love to hear a little bit about what you guys look for in employees when you're, in that hiring process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to answer your first question, we've been really fortunate that I think a lot of folks have stepped back and looked at what they want to do in the future, what legacy they really want to leave. I think the pandemic gave some folks a lot of time to say, okay, here's my skills. How do I want to take them and move forward in the future? And as you said, that's, three-prong, that's if you're really interested in supply chain and logistics, then yes, we are definitely looking at that interest. If you have a love for technology, but also really understand supply chain, that's incredible. But even just having a great passion for sustainability and having that as a background. So while we look at that from a resume perspective, we also really get deep into conversations with potential hires. We have them give them a lot of data and ask them what they would do with it. So really giving them, real life kind of scenarios so that we can better understand how they work day in, day out. Because at being an early stage startup, there's things that go out of the scope. We're still wearing a lot of hats. So someone who can, come to the table with solutions, but also be interested in helping out, even if that means, we have to sweep the floors that day. It's just, it's fully scoped, and that will shift over time, but it is where we are today and something we definitely look for.
One thing I think, founders are always thinking about is, how do they fuel growth? And I'm curious from your perspective, that MVP, bootstrapping, raising capital, getting to a point of having revenue to grow. How did you fuel from like the very beginning to now? How is that changing for you?
Yeah, so the question is how we fuel the growth from kind of the starting out smaller 3 years ago to where we are to now today in terms of kind of raising revenue, building out the product and the roadmap and everything. And kind of to what I was mentioning before, lower entry into this field, while obviously, part of your is going to just constantly fundraising. And so that was always one of our to-dos list of a given week or day, and kind of building on that. And we were really lucky that, we critical note the role in cap as we found really great investors and kind of incremental fuel our growth in terms of mix as that money rolled to put it in more.
You cut out a little bit, Chantal, but got the gist. But I think, all in all, it's similar to a map. You can create as many roadmaps as you can, but there are always twists and turns. You sometimes make a wrong turn, but I think always coming back to those certain milestones, to that bigger vision, brings everything back together. But I think the biggest key within that is knowing that, yes, you have this roadmap, but constantly listening to your customers, your potential customers, so you continue to truly build a product that's needed within the industry. You may think you understand what it is that everyone needs, and you set out this really long roadmap, but what truly will add value to the industry, but also the customer at hand and potential customers, is constantly listening and developing the products in a way that that will really add that value. I think one of the things that we watched really closely was, a lot of folks in SMB, and they continued to come as a Shopify user and platform. So continuing to see that, year over year, that, gave us that very clear signal. Okay, we need to shift a little and add these new layers of integrations and technologies that really help for streamlining onboarding for reuse within a Shopify kind of scenario. So by listening and just watching data of and collecting that of what our customers are doing, what platforms they're using, how they're growing, it allows us to add value that they can easily use immediately.
So it looks like Chantal dropped off. Hopefully she'll be back.
She'll be back. Yeah, I lost my translator temporarily.
Yeah, no. So we'll keep the conversation going. You mentioned that, your growth to this point it's happened organically, and you guys are looking to shift, to grow the marketing team and the focus. What does that look like as you guys are looking to scale up? What's the approach that you're taking to that? What can you share there? Have been some learning lessons and in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, from a very tactical perspective, we outlined everything that we were doing still manually, and then mapped out a plan to what makes the most sense to continue to automate everything that we were doing manually. But then also look at, all that content, all that intake we had developed of questions, what are concerns, what are any kind of barriers, and being able to not only develop technology, but then also assets and tools and content to really help the user move through that journey. So we're taking all of that and putting layers so that someone can easily come onto the website and move through at a really lovely flow to get them to a point to where they actually get the product that they need. But then once they have that product, also be able to really deliver on it and add value to their current customer. So we look at it from the full stream, not just from, yes, let's convert, but then let's also, make sure that once we are working with these incredible folks, that we can continue to add value and make sure that their reuse program is effective as possible.
And you talked about it a little bit, earlier in getting that feedback from, the users. What does it's down to two of us now. Then there were two, right? Yeah, and apologize to everybody for all the issues that we're having here today. It's one of those days. But hopefully we can keep this going. It looks like there's Andy. I guess the question, hey, Andy, welcome back. Let's see if Ashley can hear you now.
Ashley, can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you.
There we go.
Oh my gosh.
That was the key.
That makes it better.
No, I was just going to ask, what's the process for collecting that user feedback so that you can use it and parlay it into things like your marketing, your positioning, roadmap, so on and so forth?
Yeah. I mean, pretty manual at first, intake form, it goes out to an email to the right person to respond, but then also goes into a more of a spreadsheet to be able to collect that data. So I'm always at the frame of mind, don't invest too much into something until you really understand what you're doing, what you need to collect, why you're collecting it, and then start putting layers of technology around it to make it really sophisticated, to pull it into dashboards, to be able to really quickly share that with your internal team, but your external team, and be able to understand it at a high level to guide you to make those next steps and those next decisions. But, always start really scrappy and then build upon it. It allows you to move really fast, but then invest in what really needs to be invested in that will add value.
What kind of challenges have you run into as you've, had to build out and scale the business? Like, what were some of the barriers that you ran into that were big problems that you had to solve as a founder?
Yeah, I have this great longtime mentor, and I always thought if I could convince him on this idea, because he's been in the industry for probably way too long, he'd say that this is definitely a solvable solution. And so I spent probably 6 months, looking at every part of the industry, already understanding a lot of it, working through it, and truly understanding what these brands and retailers were looking for, but then also what the big barriers were and why it hadn't moved quicker before. And so we knew going into this that there were going to be problems, but they were all solvable. And once you solve them, that's where you start to see that large scale and really incredible solution that to me was worth, really going after. And I think, we think about it just from a standpoint, we're working with 4 different stakeholders. We're working with retailers, we're working with their consumers, we're working with 3PLs and carriers. So just even if you think about the infrastructure of 3PLs and carriers, that's a 150-year-old industry that was all built around brick and mortar. And we have really quickly moved to an e-commerce infrastructure, but a lot hasn't been done on the back end of supply chain. So we knew that those workflows were stuck in a certain position. So we would have to come in it, one, with understanding and curiosity, Two, with grace on how we start to add these layers of technology, and then really approach it with a technology forward to be able to solve it at a larger scale. So for example, one thing that we thought we wouldn't even really run into within 3PLs is actually developing or printing out multiple return labels. One label that goes for the package to you to receive it, and then another label for you to be able to flip it, to send it back empty, and then maybe another label if you have a return. So in a simple form, you could just scan one label and it would go wherever direction you'd want. But, warehouse management systems hadn't caught up to e-commerce in all 3PL systems. So it was something from the very beginning that, one, we needed to figure out, but two, really needed to figure out from a tracking perspective. And so that's really guided us not only where we are today and solving that in a very quick way from that infrastructure, but also developing the sensor technology in a way to where we can make that more sophisticated and kind of jump through some of the loops of the infrastructure that's been set for probably way too long.
So, I think that's a great thing for other founders, that they get into a business where in some ways they're very affected by other parties. And you talked about these 4 different groups, and even in the 3PLs, like you said, their technology and maybe mindset is so far behind.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the best way to approach that is, if you're building a business,
mm-hmm.
is these, outside forces that are very impactful to your business that maybe you don't have as much control over as you wish?
Yeah, I think a lot of curiosity, but to be able to be in a room to where you can even ask questions, it's really understanding that whole ecosystem. So who are the people that would make the more sense to ask those questions to? And then once you identify those people, who within your network can make that really warm introduction, so you can actually just have those real conversations like, hey, I'm building this thing. What do you think the barriers are going to be? Where's your interest lie? What are your biggest problems today? We went to one of the largest retailers in the world and said, look, what are your must-haves? What do you need today? And it just happened to reflect the same exact roadmap that we had developed. So by having that curiosity, by having that conversation, it validated what we were working on, but also has led to a really incredible partnership for us. So I say definitely map out your questions, map out what you need to understand, know those stakeholders within those companies, and then just start to chip away with it. It won't happen overnight, especially if they're big corporations like the UPS, DHLs of the world. But just by making those relationships, they continue to get deeper and allow you to not only understand the industry, but eventually, lead to some really great foundational kind of partnerships, just because you are thoughtful and understand the organization and what their true objectives and needs are for the future.
You mentioned mentorship, and that has been a common thread on our show. And so, going past like mentors are good, how did you find the right mentors, and how do you leverage them to be really impactful for you and your organization?
Yeah, I would say intention. And then from that, with the intention, I grew first company and lived in the Bay Area for 15 years. So just through events, through other folks, truly asking people for what I needed, everyone's pretty willing to help and open up their doors and connect you. So if I would say first, just ask for what you need, ask for what you want. And if someone doesn't want to help you, then they're probably not the right person anyway that you really want to interact with. And then from the intentional perspective, once you have that network, then, for me, I said, look, I really want to meet a CEO who has built a really rich company from a cultural perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, but also understands supply chain. And so I looked within that network and then just kept calling people or, texting, whatever, just saying, hey, would you mind introducing me to this person? And my longtime mentor, I just kept bugging that one person. And then we finally connected and we chatted, probably once a week. And have been really for the last 5 years, to the point we said, wait, has it really been 5 years? I just, there's just those people that you really kind of connect and hit it off with, your personal values align, your professional values align. And it's just it's always great to have that person when you're just in the 2 o'clock in the morning kind of scenario. Don't call them at 2 in the morning, but you can call them the next morning and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or give them a quick text. We even use some of those mentors today to interview some of our potential candidates when we're making, an executive, role decision, and you are in a director role up to C-suite. And they've been just great from, understanding us, understanding our culture, all the way to understanding the company, to just being able to give really blunt, intentional feedback. So yes, I definitely, mentors are incredible. Be cautious of how many you have, but definitely incorporate them into how you grow the company.
Yeah, and I would just add, and sorry for, it wouldn't be a live event without technical, thank you. It definitely would not be a live event without technical difficulties. But the only thing I would add to that is really kind of think about how you want to, or how you've been approached to be a mentor in the past. And so for me, I know one of my pet peeves is getting those cold messages on LinkedIn that's just like, hey, you're a founder, can we grab coffee? It's just like, I don't really know what to do with that, as opposed to like, hey, I noticed that you work in X space and I'm working through Y problem. Do you mind if I pick your brain about how to solve this thing? And so just getting really specific about the ask and the need, recognizing that we obviously all have a lot on our plate right now. But if there's a way that I can specifically help you, I'm happy to. So then kind of turning that back on its head when I need help for something, to be kind of a similar kind of mentality of being respectful in the time and being direct in the ask, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and along these lines, I want to ask you guys, as being female founders and minority, how does that play into mentorship, the ecosystem? What can you tell other founders that maybe are in, from your same perspective, how they need to navigate scaling a business?
Yeah, I think I always say, look at it as leadership first. So you're setting out to be an excellent leader and just continuing to be representative in that note. But then also being a part of the conversation is critical to making a pass forward, so that we do look at it as we're all just leaders and we're all just building businesses. And so, at first I really kind of shied away from actually being invited to speak as a female founder, but found that by doing that, I'm actually not making a difference or pushing the industry forward to recognize that we're all equal sitting at the table. And it's what the conversation and how you act on that conversation is what's actually really powerful. So I think the moment we can continue to push that forward, the more we'll see a difference in how we all build companies collaboratively and in a multidisciplinary kind of approach. But I know Chantal has some great perspective on this. Well, of course, it's something we talk about often, but also, talk more about how do we continue to be good leaders in the space.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say definitely in the beginning, it's probably something that weighed heavier on my mind, but it's also, you have that realization where it's like, I can't and don't want to change anything about me. So it's really about really finding the folks that are the best people to work with. And what that has led us to is a cap table of investors and advisors and mentors who we know see us for who we are and for the hard work that we're putting together and the company we're building. And so it's really rich in that. And one of the things Ashley used to mention, if every no equals one yes, maybe for us it's every 200 no's equals one yes, but it doesn't really change what we have to do, right? We have to keep hitting the ground. We have to keep waking up excited about what we're doing and what we're building. And it might just mean that we're having to be scrappier about how we do that, which in the long run could help us build an even stronger company. So it's really about not focusing on those differences, but A, using them as an asset, and B, recognizing that it is not our problem that females don't or have a harder time raising money. It's the folks who are giving and investing the money that have the problem. So we get to focus on our big problems that we're solving, that we talked about, because we have enough to handle with that, and can't really focus on kind of what they're thinking when we walk into a room.
Yeah, we've had a lot of female founders on our show, and that has been a common thread, is the more difficulty in investment. What do you think the opportunity is in the startup space and investing for us to embrace female founders and folks that don't look like me probably at the end of the day more in the marketplace?
Well, I mean, the percentages are still low, but we're starting to see more money be invested in female founders just because they're building smart, great companies. And as that money continues to go into those circles, that money is being reinvested back into minorities and female founders. So my hope and my goal is you'll continue to see an equalization of folks sitting at the table, sitting at boardrooms, and hopefully with continued awareness that, people do realize that it does create a great culture and a great development of how we build. And so, of course, money always talks. So if we can get more money into the system first and then continue to up level just great, incredible founders, we'll continue to see a development of true solutions coming together from companies that will make and break, the future of our economy in the US, but also globally as well.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is just making sure that we're having these conversations across the board and not putting the onus on minorities and women to solve the problem that we not only did not create, but are actually having to face. And so just making sure that these conversations are had with those on both sides of the fence, because obviously we have a lot of opinions about it going through it, but I think the real change comes from when everyone at the table is having these conversations in a meaningful way.
That's great.
All right, with a few minutes left here, I want to shift gears once again. I would love to hear a bit about the plans for the future for LimeLoop, and specifically knowing that you guys are in a space, you're in logistics, it's technology, it's all these fast, evolving, moving, changing parts. And as you said, you're trying to be nimble, you're listening to the feedback of your customers. How do you plan for that? And then what does the next 12 months look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working towards that big vision of adding visibility into the full supply chain. And as Chantal mentioned before, that is a large task to take on. So we are continuing to really, pull that into chunks. So within the next year, just from a reusable package standpoint, we went into it this idea of let's keep the reusable packages agnostic so that they can move really easily through the full stream. But as we continue to listen to our customers, they still love a branded experience for their consumer. So we're working on a lot of new kind of cool systems for automation, for customization at scale. So that's something you could keep an eye out. But the sensors, and I'll let Chantal tell you more, is that we're also really excited to continue to release to all companies. We've been in piloting stages with some of the largest customers in the world, but also, small to medium-sized brands. And so being able to release that technology and those sensors with kind of a data predictive analytic infrastructure, something we're really heads down working on this year as well.
Yeah, so to add on the technology side, so it's kind of a combination of recognizing where it makes sense for us to double down on building custom apps within our own network versus kind of meeting people where they are. And so for us, that looks like a lot of the native Shopify integration. So if a lot of our small, medium businesses are already using Shopify for their e-commerce needs, it makes more sense for us to build in our assets and our features into that platform. Whereas our enterprise customers already have their own digital platform. So most of our focus is around building up the SDK so for them to be able to leverage the data that we're collecting for them in a meaningful way and serve that up to their end consumers. And then on the sensor side, as a technology, it's a really exciting time to be doing what we're doing. Like we literally would not have been able to build a technology that we're building right now 5 years ago. The battery life wouldn't have been there. The technology around the sensors would not have been small and lightweight enough to make sense to ship around at the scale that we're shipping and to build out at the scale that we're building. And that's changing every day too. So if we were to have this conversation this time next year, our sensors would probably take on a very different form and have very different capabilities just based on what people are working on in the IoT space right now. So it allows us to, again, going back to the idea of having this bigger vision of where we want to get to, and then leveraging the available technology that we have right now to incrementally get there.
You talked about Shopify and enterprise, integrating with Shopify SDKs, but have you had to have the conversation of who is our best target audience and where do we focus our time in product building and marketing? Because I think that's a challenge a lot of founders have is big vision, limited time and money. Mm-hmm. So Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have that conversation daily. It's something that we went into it with a focus on really high growth for the next 5 years with SMB. But with enterprise, really just knocking at our door, asking for a solution that goes back to just listening to the customer, the environment, the industry. But with that, what we started to really realize, by investing in enterprise, they build out the infrastructure that feeds into SMB to make it really easy for them to be able to plug into a reuse program. So by bringing the full market share of SMB and enterprise together, they work really beautifully together for our company. But for other companies, I usually say simplify and focus. And so that's why we talk about it daily, because it's definitely been my mantra. And so I say, wait, are we simplified and focused? So we look at simplifying and focus in a different way. We say, yes, from externally, we are working with SMB to enterprise, but internally, we focus it in a really strategic way to make sure that all of our resources, all of our team is focused so that we can still be scrappy and scale and have enough resources to be able to get to those larger milestones.
It's great. And I'll just tell you, I am a huge believer of the simplify and focus.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked the question, is because I think that is the right approach, but I think so many founders struggle with it day in and day out.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think what I've come to, you just have to define what simplify and focus is for your company, because it is so different for every company. And that's where we finally realized, okay, yes, simplify and focus, but let's simplify and focus on these under layers, knowing that for us, all these companies, bringing them together actually provides a bigger solution.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to, learn more, pay attention, see what's going on with both each of you, Ashley, Chantal, as well as LimeLoop?
Yeah, always reach out to us on LinkedIn. info@the LimeLoop is a great way. And then you can always catch us on any of our social media channels, which is at the LimeLoop. And then, of course, thelimeloop.com.
Awesome.
So a final question that I like to ask everybody, and both of you could answer, is if you went into the past, let's say 10 years and had coffee with yourself, what advice would you give?
I always say, simplify and focus, which is a really interesting one that we've always gone to. But I think, another one is just go with your gut instinct. As much as we have data to guide us and move forward, there's some point, I had a point of this yesterday where we're running into the shifts of hardware, as Chantal was mentioning, and, shortage of supplies, costs going up. And I said, man, I should have listened to my gut and developed the sensor technology a year and a half ago. But you never know where you are. Everything shifts and changes. Resources were different. But, I say, of course, just go with your gut instinct. We have so much data we can fall through, but with that comes a lot of perseverance, because when you make that decision, you have to act on it and go forward.
Yeah, I was going to say my practical side would have been to pre-order all the compressors before the shortage started. But at a higher level, I think more around just kind of a messaging around the fact that I'm on the right path. I think especially as founders, you can question yourself a lot and the decisions you're making, especially in the early days when people don't necessarily understand what you're doing or if the way that you're doing it is really the right way. And so just kind of reassuring my past self that no, you're not crazy. This is actually a really great solution and we'll find market fit, and you're just kind of keep doing what you're doing.
Those were great. Thank you both.
Awesome. So we are pretty much out of time here. We want to say thank you so much, Chantal and Ashley, for both of you for joining us. It's been fantastic. We made it. We got through this. We're all four here and streaming. Appreciate you bearing with. Yeah, of course, I probably cut out a little bit here at the end, right? But anyway, thank you for our viewers. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again next week. And until then, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, and take care.
Thank you.